What happens when someone tells you that your dreams are impossible because of the color of your skin? What occurs when an entire industry looks at you and sees everything you're not instead of everything you could become? What if the person they said doesn't belong ends up building something that changes the world? It's May 2012 at the prestigious TechCrunch Disrupt conference in San Francisco. The room is packed with venture capitalists, tech entrepreneurs, and industry leaders, overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly convinced that they know exactly what innovation looks like. Standing at the registration table is a young black woman in her early 20s, clutching a business plan for a social media app that she's convinced could revolutionize how people connect online. As she approaches a prominent venture capitalist to pitch her idea, he barely glances at her before interrupting with a dismissive laugh. "Sweetie," he says, loud enough for others to hear, "black girls ain't techies. You might be better suited for marketing or maybe customer service. The actual tech development, that's not really your lane." The words hit like a slap across the face. But what the venture capitalist doesn't know is that he's just dismissed Zara Thompson, a computer science graduate from MIT who had been coding since she was 12 years old. He doesn't know that her simple social media idea is backed by revolutionary artificial intelligence algorithms that she developed herself. And he certainly doesn't know that 10 years later, her app would reach 1 billion users, making her one of the youngest black women to build a tech unicorn. This is the story of how 3 words, "Black girls ain't techies," became the fuel for a revolution. It's about a young woman who refused to let other people's limitations become her own, and how she proved that innovation has no color, genius has no gender, and success belongs to anyone brave enough to claim it. Zara Thompson was born in 1990 in East Cleveland, Ohio, to parents who understood that education would be their daughter's pathway to opportunities they had never had. Her father, Jerome Thompson, worked as a mechanic at a local auto shop while studying engineering at community college in the evenings. Her mother, Dr. Angela Thompson, was a high school mathematics teacher who had overcome significant barriers to become one of the few black educators in her predominantly white suburban school district. The Thompson household was built on the Jolie foundation of curiosity and learning. While other families gathered around television shows, the Thompsons spent evenings working on math problems, discussing scientific concepts, and encouraging Zara to ask questions about everything she encountered. When 8-year-old Zara became fascinated with her family's first computer, her parents sacrificed to enroll her in weekend coding classes at the local community center. The early 2000s were a transformative time in technology, with the internet becoming mainstream and social media platforms beginning to emerge. But the tech industry was even more homogeneous than it is today. According to industry reports from that era, less than 2% of tech workers were black women, and the stereotype of who could be successful in technology was rigidly defined. Growing up as a black girl interested in technology meant constantly swimming against the current of expectations. Zara's middle school guidance counselor suggested she focus on more realistic career paths. Her high school computer science teacher, Mr. Davidson, initially assumed she was in the wrong classroom and suggested she consider switching to typing or business skills classes. "Computer programming is very complex," Mr. Davidson told her during the first week of class. "It requires a specific type of logical thinking that, frankly, most girls, especially girls from your background, struggle with. I don't want you to get frustrated and give up." But Zara's parents had taught her to see obstacles as opportunities to prove people wrong. While her classmates were using computers for games and social media, Zara was teaching herself advanced programming languages through online tutorials and library books. By her sophomore year of high school, she had created her first mobile app, a study buddy platform that helped students in her school organize study groups and share resources. The racial climate in tech during Zara's formative years was defined by what researchers now recognize as innovation apartheid, the systematic exclusion of people of color from the spaces, resources, and networks that drive technological advancement. Silicon Valley's culture was built around the myth of the young white male genius working in a garage to revolutionize the world. Stories of black women's contributions to tech were either erased from history or never told at all. Despite excelling in her computer science courses and consistently outperforming her peers, Zara faced constant microaggressions and assumptions about her abilities. During group projects, team members would automatically assume she should handle presentation duties rather than coding. When she proposed innovative solutions to programming challenges, her ideas were often ignored until repeated by white or male classmates. The summer before her senior year of high school, Zara attended a prestigious coding camp at Stanford University. She was one of only 3 black students among 200 participants, and the only black woman. The experience was both inspiring and isolating. She was surrounded by cutting-edge technology and brilliant minds, but she constantly felt like an outsider looking in. I remember sitting in the dining hall, Zara would later recall, and realizing that I could be just as smart as anyone else in that room. But I was never going to be seen that way, because I didn't look like what people expected a technologist to look like. It was during that Stanford camp that Zara first conceived the idea that would eventually become her billion-user app. She noticed how the social media platforms of the time, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, were designed primarily by and for white users, often failing to account for the ways that people of color use technology differently. She began sketching out concepts for a platform that would use artificial intelligence to create more inclusive and culturally relevant social experiences. Her acceptance to MIT was a validation of her abilities, but it also marked the beginning of an even more challenging phase of her journey. MIT's computer science program was notoriously competitive and overwhelmingly white and male. As one of fewer than a dozen black women in her class, Zara experienced what researchers call solo status, the psychological pressure of being the only person of her demographic in high-stakes academic and professional environments. The isolation was compounded by persistent assumptions about her qualifications. Professors would ask she was keeping up with coursework that she was actually excelling in. Classmates would express surprise when she solved complex problems or contributed innovative ideas to team projects. Some students openly questioned whether she was there because of affirmative action rather than merit. But MIT also provided Zara with access to resources and mentors who would prove crucial to her future success. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, one of the few Latina professors in the computer science department, became a mentor who helped Zara navigate the academic and social challenges of being an underrepresented minority in tech. Zara had this remarkable ability to see problems that the rest of us missed, Dr. Rodriguez later remembered. While other students were focused on building faster processors or more efficient algorithms, she was asking fundamental questions about who technology serves and how it could be more inclusive. By her junior year at MIT, Zara had developed the core artificial intelligence framework that would eventually power her social media platform. Her senior thesis project was a recommendation algorithm that could account for cultural context and implicit bias, essentially teaching computers to understand that not everyone's social networks, interests, or communication styles followed the same patterns. When she graduated summa cum laude in 2012, Zara felt ready to change the world. What she wasn't prepared for was how the tech industry would receive a young black woman with revolutionary ideas. The TechCrunch Disrupt conference in May 2012 was Zara Thompson's first major attempt to break into Silicon Valley's exclusive venture capital ecosystem. She had spent months preparing for this moment, refining her pitch deck, practicing her presentation, and researching every investor who would be attending. Her social media platform, which she had named Connect, was more than just another social network. It was a revolutionary approach to online community building that used artificial intelligence to combat algorithmic bias and create more inclusive digital spaces. Zara's app addressed a problem that most of the tech industry didn't even recognize existed. While platforms like Facebook and Twitter claimed to connect people, their algorithms often reinforced existing social bubbles and perpetuated cultural biases. Connect's AI was designed to actively promote cross-cultural understanding, help users discover diverse perspectives, and create communities based on shared interests rather than demographic similarities. The technical innovation was groundbreaking, but Zara knew that in the venture capital world, even the most brilliant technology meant nothing without the right connections and the right presentation. She had saved for months to afford the conference registration fee and a single night in a budget hotel 40 minutes outside San Francisco. The conference was a stark reminder of how homogeneous the tech industry remained. The exhibition floor was filled with booths showcasing startups led almost exclusively by young white men. The networking sessions buzzed with conversations about disruption and innovation, but the speakers and investors making those decisions looked remarkably similar to each other. Zara had identified Richard Sterling as her primary target investor. Sterling was a partner at Pinnacle Ventures, one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious VC firms, known for early investments in several successful social media platforms. His portfolio included 3 companies that had achieved billion-dollar valuations, and his endorsement could provide the credibility and funding that Connect needed to scale. When Zara approached Sterling during a networking break, she was nervous, but confident. She had rehearsed her 30-second elevator pitch dozens of times, focusing on the market opportunity, the technical innovation, and the potential for viral growth. She was prepared to discuss user acquisition costs, revenue models, and competitive differentiation. What she wasn't prepared for was to be dismissed before she could even begin. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling," Zara said, extending her hand with a professional smile. "I'm Zara Thompson, founder of Connect. I'd love to share how we're using AI to revolutionize social media engagement." Sterling barely looked up from his phone. "Sweetie," he interrupted, his tone condescending and dismissive, "black girls ain't techies. You might be better suited for marketing or maybe customer service. The actual tech development, that's not really your lane." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. Around them, the networking session continued, investors and entrepreneurs shaking hands, exchanging business cards, discussing million-dollar deals. But for Zara, the world seemed to stop. Sterling's casual dismissal wasn't just a rejection of her pitch. It was a rejection of her identity as a technologist, her years of education and experience, and her fundamental right to be taken seriously in the industry she had worked so hard to join. Other people had witnessed the exchange. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed amused, and a few simply ignored what had happened and continued their own conversations. Nobody spoke up. Nobody challenged Sterling's assessment. In that moment, Zara realized that she wasn't just facing individual prejudice. She was confronting an entire ecosystem that couldn't conceive of a black woman as a serious tech entrepreneur. "Actually," Zara said, her voice steady despite the humiliation she felt, "I have a computer science degree from MIT. I've been coding for over a decade, and I've developed proprietary AI algorithms that solve problems your portfolio companies haven't even recognized yet." Sterling finally looked up from his phone, but his expression was one of annoyed incredulity rather than interest. "Look, I'm sure you're very smart," he said in the tone one might use with a persistent child, "but this industry requires a specific type of technical expertise and business acumen. Maybe start small or learn the ropes and work your way up." The Implication was clear. Even with her credentials, even with her innovation, even with her preparation, she was being told to know her place. Sterling wasn't just rejecting her specific pitch. He was rejecting the possibility that someone who looked like her could be a serious player in the tech industry. Other investors at the conference exhibited similar biases, though few were as explicitly dismissive as Sterling. Zara found herself consistently having to prove her technical credentials before anyone would listen to her business proposition. Male entrepreneurs with far less impressive backgrounds and weaker technical foundations were given attention and consideration that seemed automatically denied to her. One investor asked if she had a technical co-founder who could handle the real development work. Another suggested that her app might be better positioned as a lifestyle or diversity platform rather than a serious tech company. A third questioned whether there was really a market for social media platforms that prioritized inclusion over growth metrics. The constant stream of microaggressions and implicit bias was exhausting. By the end of the 3-day conference, Zara had managed to secure only 2 follow-up meetings, both with junior associates at smaller firms, who seemed more interested in checking a diversity box than seriously considering her investment opportunity. Ride back to the airport was one of the lowest moments in Zara's life. She had come to San Francisco believing that her technical skills, educational credentials, and innovative ideas would speak for themselves. Instead, she had learned that in the eyes of the venture capital establishment, her race and gender disqualified her before she even opened her mouth. But during that long flight back to Boston, something shifted in Zara's mindset. Sterling's words, "Black girls ain't techies," had been intended to diminish her, to put her in her place, to convince her that she didn't belong. Instead, they became a challenge that she was determined to meet. She pulled out her laptop and began working on her business plan with renewed focus. If the traditional venture capital route was closed to her because of prejudice and bias, she would find another way. She would bootstrap her company, seek funding from alternative sources, and prove that innovation didn't require the approval of people who couldn't see past their own assumptions. By the time the plane landed in Boston, Zara had made a decision that would define the next decade of her life. She wasn't going to let other people's limitations become her own. She was going to build Connect into the billion-user platform she knew it could become, and she was going to do it in spite of, and partly because of everyone who had told her it was impossible. Richard Sterling's dismissive comment would eventually become one of the most expensive 3 seconds in venture capital history. The company he refused to consider would go on to become one of the most valuable startups of the decade, while his own portfolio struggled with the kind of innovation challenges that Zara's AI algorithms had been designed to solve. The months following the TechCrunch Disrupt conference were among the most challenging of Zara Thompson's life. The sting of Richard Sterling's dismissal had evolved into a burning determination, but determination alone couldn't solve the practical challenges of building a tech startup without traditional venture capital funding. Zara returned to her small apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with $3,000 in her bank account and a revolutionary app that no investor seemed willing to take seriously. Her MIT education had prepared her for technical challenges, but it hadn't taught her how to navigate an industry that seemed designed to exclude people who looked like her. The first challenge was financial. Without venture capital, Zara had to bootstrap Connect's development using her own savings and credit cards. She took a part-time consulting job with a local software company, working 20 hours a week to pay rent while dedicating every other waking moment to coding, user research, and product development. The isolation was profound. While her MIT classmates were landing prestigious jobs at Google, Facebook, and Apple, Zara was working alone in her apartment, building something that most people couldn't understand or didn't believe in. The few friends who understood her technical capabilities often questioned her business judgment. Why are you trying to compete with Facebook? Asked David Shun, a former classmate who had joined Google's engineering team. Even if your eye is better which? I'm not saying it's not. They have billions of users and unlimited resources. Maybe you should focus on getting hired at a real tech company first. The suggestion that she should abandon her entrepreneurial dreams and seek employment at established companies came from well-meaning friends and family members who were concerned about her financial stability. But Zara had studied the career trajectories of black women in major tech companies, and the statistics were discouraging. Black women made up less than 1% of technical leadership roles at major tech firms, faced persistent wage gaps, and often struggled to advance beyond mid-level positions. Dr. Angela Rodriguez, her former MIT professor, became one of Zara's few sources of professional encouragement during this period. The venture capital rejection isn't about your technology or your business model, Dr. Rodriguez told her during one of their monthly coffee meetings. It's about an industry that can't imagine success coming from someone who doesn't fit there. Stereotypes. But that same blindness will become your competitive advantage. The technical development of Connect proceeded slowly but steadily. Zara's AI algorithms were more sophisticated than anything being used by existing social media platforms, but developing a consumer-ready application required resources she didn't have. She couldn't afford the kind of server infrastructure needed to support thousands of simultaneous users, let alone millions. The breakthrough came when Zara connected with other underrepresented entrepreneurs who were facing similar challenges. Through online forums and local meets, she discovered a network of women of color who are building innovative companies outside the traditional venture capital ecosystem. One of these connections was Maya Patel, a South Asian entrepreneur who had developed a successful fintech app using a combination of bootstrapping, crowdfunding, and investment from family and friends. Maya introduced Zara to alternative funding sources that many traditional entrepreneurs never considered. The VC world wants to see people who look like them and think like them, Maya explained. But there's a whole ecosystem of investors who are specifically looking for diverse founders with innovative ideas. You just have to know where to look. Through Maya's network, Zara discovered angel investor groups focused on supporting women and minority entrepreneurs. These investors were often more willing to take risks on unconventional founders and business models, though they typically provided smaller amounts of capital than traditional VC firms. Zara's first significant funding came from Jennifer Kim, a Korean-American tech executive who had experienced her own challenges with discrimination in Silicon Valley. Kim invested $50,000 in Connect seed round, providing enough capital for Zara to quit her consulting job and focus full-time on product development. But even with initial funding, Zara faced ongoing challenges that her white male counterparts rarely encountered. When she hired her first employee, a talented black engineer named Marcus, Williams' potential investors questioned whether her team had sufficient cultural fit for the Silicon Valley ecosystem. One investor told her explicitly that her company needed more diverse perspectives, by which he meant white men. Another suggested that she consider bringing on a white male co-founder who could serve as the face of the company during investor meetings and media interviews. The microaggressions were constant and exhausting. During product demos, potential partners would address technical questions to Marcus rather than Zara, despite her being the founder and lead developer. Industry publications consistently misidentified her as Connect's marketing director rather than its CEO and technical founder. The psychological toll was significant. Zara began experiencing what researchers call racial battle fatigue, the mental and physical exhaustion that results from constantly fighting against racism and bias. Some mornings, she would sit in her apartment and wonder if Sterling had been right. If she was fighting a battle she couldn't win, But the early user feedback for Connect was overwhelmingly positive. Beta testers were excited about the platform's ability to facilitate meaningful cross-cultural connections and create more inclusive online communities. The AI algorithms were working exactly as Zara had envisioned, breaking down social bubbles and promoting understanding across demographic boundaries. The validation from users provided the motivation Zara needed to persevere through the industry's skepticism. She realized that while investors and industry leaders might not understand the value of what she was building, the people who needed Connect most certainly did. By late 2013, Connect had attracted 10,000 active users and was growing by 20% month over month. The platform was beginning to attract attention from tech journalists and industry analysts who were impressed by its innovative approach to social networking. But Zara knew that reaching the next level would require significant capital and strategic partnerships that seemed out of reach. The same venture capital firms that had dismissed her in 2012 were now beginning to notice Connect's growth, but their interest came with conditions that would have fundamentally changed the company's mission and values. The question wasn't whether Zara could build a successful company. She had already proven that. The question was whether she could do it while staying true to her vision and values in an industry that seemed determined to force her into someone else's mold. By January 2015, Connect had reached 1 million active users, making it one of the fastest-growing social media platforms in the world. The app's artificial intelligence had created something unprecedented, a social network where people regularly engaged with content and perspectives outside their usual cultural and political bubbles. Users were forming friendships across racial lines, discovering music and art from different cultures, and having meaningful conversations about complex social issues. The growth metrics were undeniable, but Zara Thompson still couldn't secure the kind of institutional investment that would allow Connect to compete with Facebook, Twitter, and other established platforms. The same venture capital firms that had dismissed her in 2012 were now expressing interest, but their proposed terms would have required Zara to give up controlling interest in her company and accept oversight from investors who didn't understand or support her vision. The climactic moment came during a board meeting in February 2015, when Pinnacle Ventures' Richard Sterling's firm requested a meeting to discuss a potential investment in Connect. Sterling himself wouldn't be leading the deal, but the irony wasn't lost on anyone involved. "We're prepared to offer a $10 million Series A investment," announced Jessica Walsh, Pinnacle's newest partner, who had been brought in specifically to diversify the firm's portfolio. "However, we have some concerns about the current leadership, structure, and strategic direction." Zara sat at the head of the conference table in Pinnacle's glass-walled meeting room, the same building where Sterling had dismissed her 3 years earlier. The terms being proposed would value Connect at $50 million, a significant validation, but with strings attached that would fundamentally alter the company's identity. "Our market research suggests that Connect's focus on diversity and inclusion, while admirable, may limit its scalability," Walsh continued. "We'd like to see the platform evolve toward more mainstream engagement patterns. Our recommendation would be to bring in experienced leadership, perhaps a proven CEO with a track record in social media." The implication was clear. Despite Connect's proven success and Zara's demonstrated ability to build and scale the platform, Pinnacle still didn't believe a black woman could lead a billion-dollar tech company. Marcus Williams, who had become Zara's co-founder and CTO, spoke up. "The diversity and inclusion features aren't a limitation. They're our competitive advantage. Our user engagement metrics are higher than Facebook's because people are having more meaningful interactions." But Walsh's response revealed the persistent blindness that characterized much of the venture capital industry. User engagement is important, but monetization requires broader appeal. We need to think about advertising revenue from major brands, and those brands typically want to reach mainstream demographics. Zara realized that this moment would define not just Connect's future, but her own legacy as an entrepreneur. She could accept Pinnacle's investment, compromise her vision, and become another black founder who had been forced to conform to white investors' expectations. Or she could bet everything on her belief that there was a better way to build both technology and business. "I appreciate the offer," Zara said, standing up from the conference table, "but Connect's mission isn't negotiable. We're not building another platform that reinforces existing biases and divisions. We're creating technology that brings people together across differences." Walsh looked surprised. "Zara, this is a significant opportunity. Pinnacle has the resources and connections to help Connect reach the next level." "What you're offering isn't the next level," Zara replied. "It's a step backward into the same thinking that created the problems we're solving. Connect will find another way." As she walked out of Pinnacle's offices, Zara felt the same mixture of fear and determination that had sustained her since that first rejection at TechCrunch Disrupt. She was betting her company's future on the belief that there were investors who would support innovation without demanding conformity. The breakthrough came 6 weeks later, when Zara received a call from Dr. Sarah Chun, a venture capitalist and former Google executive who had been following Connect's growth. Chun represented a new generation of investors who understood that diversity wasn't just morally right, it was economically advantageous. "What you've built with Connect is exactly what the industry needs," Chun told Zara during their first phone conversation. "The AI algorithms, the user engagement, the growth metrics, everything about this company suggests it could be the next major platform. And the fact that you've done it while maintaining your values makes it even more impressive." Chun's firm, Innovation Partners, specialized in supporting founders from underrepresented backgrounds who are building scalable, socially conscious technology companies. Their $15 million Series A investment came with no requirements to change Connect's mission or leadership structure. The validation went beyond financial. Within days of announcing the Innovation Partners investment, Connect received partnership offers from major technology companies that had previously ignored Zara's outreach efforts. The platform's user base exploded to 10 million within 6 months, driven by word-of-mouth growth and media coverage of its innovative approach to social networking. By December 2015, Richard Sterling's 3-word dismissal, "Black girls ain't techies," had become a cautionary tale studied in business schools and venture capital training programs. The company he had refused to consider was now valued at $500 million and growing exponentially. But for Zara, the real victory wasn't financial. It was proving that innovation could come from anywhere, and that the tech industry's narrow definition of expertise had been costing it brilliant ideas and revolutionary solutions. By 2022, 10 years after Richard Sterling's dismissive comment at TechCrunch Disrupt, Connect had achieved what few people in the tech industry thought possible. It had reached 1 billion active users while maintaining its commitment to diversity, inclusion, and meaningful social connection. The platform's success had transformed not just Zara Thompson's life, but the entire landscape of social media and venture capital investment. Connect's artificial intelligence had proven that technology could actively combat bias rather than perpetuate it. And the company's financial success had demolished the myth that socially conscious business models couldn't achieve massive scale. Zara, now 32 years old, had become one of the youngest black women to build a unicorn tech company. Forbes had named her to their 30 under 30 list. Time magazine had featured her on their cover as one of the world's most influential people, and she had been invited to speak at the World Economic Forum about the future of inclusive technology. But, perhaps more importantly, Connect's success had opened doors for other entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. The company's example had inspired a new generation of venture capital firms to actively seek out diverse founders, and many of the industry's most successful recent startups had been built by women, people of color, and other historically marginalized groups. The platform itself had evolved into something far beyond social media. Connect's AI algorithms were being used by universities to promote cross-cultural understanding on college campuses, by corporations to improve diversity and inclusion in their workplace communications, and by governments to facilitate more constructive public discourse on controversial policy issues. The irony of Richard Sterling's career trajectory wasn't lost on anyone in Silicon Valley. While Connect had grown into a global phenomenon, Sterling's own portfolio had struggled with the same kinds of innovation challenges that Zara's AI had been designed to solve. Pinnacle Ventures had been forced to bring in new leadership after several high-profile investment failures, and Sterling himself had quietly left the firm in 2020. In a gesture that surprised many in the industry. Zara had hired Sterling as a consultant in 2021, tasking him with helping Pinnacle and other traditional VC firms understand how unconscious bias had cost them significant investment opportunities. The arrangement was both professionally strategic and personally satisfying, turning her former detractor into an advocate for more inclusive investment practices. I've learned that my assumptions about who could be successful in tech were not just wrong. They were expensive, Sterling admitted during a 2022 interview. Missing the opportunity to invest in Connect early cost our firm hundreds of millions of dollars. But more importantly, it cost the industry years of innovation that could have come from supporting diverse entrepreneurs. Connect's impact extended far beyond Silicon Valley. The platform had facilitated over 100 million cross-cultural friendships, helped users discover content from over 200 countries, and contributed to measurable improvements in intergroup relations in communities where it was widely adopted. Academic studies had shown that regular Connect users demonstrated increased empathy, cultural awareness, and ability to engage constructively with people who held different viewpoints. The company's success had also created opportunities for other Black women in tech. Zara had established the Thompson Foundation, which provided mentorship, funding, and resources for underrepresented entrepreneurs in STEM fields. The foundation had supported over 500 startups founded by women of color, helping to address the systematic barriers that had once made Zara's journey so difficult. Dr. Angela Rodriguez, Zara's former MIT professor, had joined Connect's board of directors and was leading the company's efforts to partner with universities and K-12 schools to encourage more young people from diverse backgrounds to pursue careers in technology. Zara's success isn't just about one person overcoming barriers, Dr. Rodriguez reflected. It's about proving that when we expand our definition of who can be innovative, everyone benefits. The algorithms that power Connect exist because Zara saw problems that the rest of the industry couldn't see. The transformation of the venture capital industry was still ongoing, but Connect's success had made it impossible for investors to ignore the business case for diversity. Firms that had historically invested almost exclusively in white male entrepreneurs were now actively recruiting diverse investment partners and implementing bias training for their decision-making processes. As Zara looked toward the future, she knew that her work was far from finished. While Connect had achieved remarkable success, the tech industry still struggled with representation, equity, and inclusion. But she also knew that every barrier she had broken had made the path easier for the next generation of entrepreneurs who didn't fit traditional Silicon Valley stereotypes. The little girl from East Cleveland, who had been told black girls ain't techies, had built a billion-user platform that was reshaping how the world connected, communicated, and understood each other across differences. The story of Zara Thompson reminds us that innovation has no color, Genius recognizes no gender, and the future belongs to those brave enough to build it, despite being told they don't belong. When Richard Sterling dismissed her with 3 cruel words, he revealed more about the limitations of his own imagination than about Zara's potential. But this story isn't just about one woman's triumph over prejudice. It's about the countless, brilliant minds that our society overlooks, underestimates, and excludes because they don't match our narrow stereotypes of what success looks like. It's about the innovations we lose, the problems we fail to solve, and the progress we delay when we allow bias to blind us to talent. The tech industry's resistance to diversity isn't just morally wrong, it's economically wasteful. Connects. Billion users exist because Zara saw problems that homogeneous teams couldn't see and developed solutions that reflected the full diversity of human experience. Her success proves that inclusion isn't charity. It's smart business. Every day, in classrooms and coding boot camps around the world, there are young black girls who love technology but wonder if they belong in spaces that seem designed for others. Some are discouraged by teachers who can't imagine them as engineers. Others are dismissed by investors who can't see past their preconceptions. Too many abandon their dreams because the barriers seem insurmountable. But Zara Thompson's story offers a different narrative. It shows us that when someone tells you that you don't belong, they're really telling you where change is needed most. When they say your dreams are impossible, they're revealing the boundaries of their own vision, not the limits of your potential. The next time someone tells you that people like you ain't techies, remember that innovation belongs to anyone bold enough to claim it. Remember that the most revolutionary ideas often come from those who society least expects to succeed. And remember that sometimes the best revenge against prejudice is simply proving them spectacularly wrong. Your code matters. Your ideas matter. You belong in the future. You're brave enough to build.